everybody, it's Mr. Wagstaff. Cool stuff to talk about today. So today we're going to start talking about more tensions in the Middle East as oil becomes a necessity for America, have to cater to some people we normally wouldn't, ends up getting some American hostages that are held hostage for over a year. America revisits the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty. And then one of the most impressive peace agreements ever signed, negotiated by America with warring countries, that the president got no credit for when it happened. All right, let's put that in context. Let's get started. So as we continue here deeper into the Cold War, even as there starts being paths forward in dealing with Russia and hopefully preventing a World War III, other very touchy situations are arising. America's increased need for oil is really tying America to the Middle East, which is a very different culture than America's. There's also a lot of tension there for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is America's support of Israel in a Muslim-dominated region of the world. But today we're going to start talking about something unique that takes place. In the middle of the Cold War, we start having issues specifically with one particular country here in the Middle East, and that is Iran. So on this map, right here is Iran. So what's interesting here is Iran was one of our big allies to kind of start the lesson here today. For about 25 years, Iran had been a big ally of ours. Mainly because of their leader, which is called the Shah. Like we have a president in the United States, they had a Shah. The Shah had ruled for quite a while. Now, I'm just using the term president as in that is the title of the leader. Not that this dude's elected. This guy's pretty much a dictator and a monarch, all right? But America's good friends with him. And you're like, huh, America's friends with dictators? Well, and they have oil, we are, because we got good oil from the Shah. So you're probably like, well, I mean, okay, there's like kings and queens. He can't be that bad. Nah, this dude is known, the Shah in Iran, like in 1978, this specific instance, he had his army open fire on a group of people that were protesting against him, killing over 100. Absolutely crazy. There is not a lot of support for him in Iran. However, they can't really stand up to him, obviously, or he just will send in the military. It rules with an iron fist. There had been people that tried to stand up to him earlier, and it's a position called the Ayatollah. It's a religious leader. You can kind of associate it in Christianity as the Pope, but not as far-reaching. The Ayatollah, this specific Ayatollah is Ayatollah Khomeini. He had tried to stand up to the Shah back in the 60s and has overwhelming support by the Muslim-populated country of Iran, so much so the Shah banished him from Iran. So how does the Shah able to banish a religious leader who's, kind of wanted to take over the country and had support? How is the Shah, if the people don't like him, and he's a dictator, how does he remain in power? Well, in large part because of America. America supports the Shah and basically backs him up and basically keeps him from getting kicked out of office. This brings us to where we are today. Now, this is Jimmy Carter. This is the president of the United States from 1976 to 1980. We're going to talk about him quite a bit today. Jimmy Carter, when he comes in, he realizes for the last 25 years, America has had a good relationship with the Shah. So the reason this is important is because it's real easy to say America doesn't like communism. We have all these ideals, but America does have a tendency to kind of ignore a lot of horrific things we otherwise wouldn't if the country we're dealing with has something that we want. In this case, oil. So Jimmy Carter, who should hate this guy with a passion, is actually on a really good relationship with the Shah of Iran. So America and Jimmy Carter have a strong relationship, as all American leaders have had with this guy who's awful in Iran, because he has oil. To give you another example of this in the world today, America had a complete and total embargo on Cuba for a long time. You couldn't buy, sell, trade nothing with Cuba because they're communists, so they're bad. But simultaneously, America's largest trading partner on earth was China, also communist. Why? Why is there two different rules for communism? Because America actually wanted stuff from China and could live without Cuba. So when we don't need something from a country, America has a tendency to draw a more firm moral line. So this is fluid, and America's really struggling with having these hard values one way or other, because those really strict values of, containment leads to things like the Vietnam War, where thousands and thousands of troops die. So it's a very touchy situation. But in this particular situation, this story gets crazy. America supports the Shah, even though he's not a good leader, because he has oil and it benefits America. So the question is, why did America support the Shah, even if he was a bad leader? So pause me, answer that completely, and we're moving on. So the Iran situation quickly spirals out of control during Carter's time in office. What happens is the Shah here gets diagnosed with cancer. Well, America, the healthcare system in America is a whole nother lesson/unit. America does have cutting-edge cancer treatment in the late 1970s. So the Shah asked his buddy Jimmy Carter, hey, can I come to America and get cancer treatment? And Jimmy Carter says, you're my buddy, sure. And the Shah leaves Iran. As soon as the Shah leaves Iran, there is this, and it kind of all happens simultaneously here, the Iranian Revolution, in which they overthrow his government. So the Shah has left, but his government gets overthrown by the people because he's not there to enforce it. And while the Shah is over in America getting cancer treatment, the Ayatollah Khomeini, returns to Iran and takes over Iran as the leader. Iran will become a fundamentalist Muslim country, devout, religious, like they're basing their laws and rules on the religious text, and it has overwhelming support in Iran when the Ayatollah Khomeini takes over in Iran. Huge support. Now, with as much support as Ayatollah has, there is equal anger because the Shah had been like opening fire with machine guns. He had been accused of like burning down movie theaters with like 400 and some people inside. The year prior, 1978, it's kind of the catalyst for this movement of just this viciousness that this man needs to be held accountable. So as much as everybody likes the Ayatollah, there is just as many demonstrations now against the Shah and burning the Shah in effigy, which basically means have a like picture or something that looks like him and setting it on fire. They want to hold him accountable. Now the Shah is over in America getting cancer treatment. When the Ayatollah takes over, he says, America, send back the Shah. He has to face the consequences of his actions. They'll put him on trial and they want to execute him in Iran. Well, Jimmy Carter and America's like, nah, like, we're not going to give you the Shah back. When America refuses to give the Shah back to Iran so he can face the charges they want to bring up on him, there is a huge anti-American sentiment that sweeps Iran. You start seeing, flags being burned, very much a hatred of America. Now, since we had been friends with Iran for a long time, we have a U.S. embassy in Iran. What an embassy is like a building that is owned by whatever country's embassy that is. Like in Washington, D.C. in America, there's a whole area that has different buildings that are owned by different countries. Like there's a German embassy. And in that little property inside that building, that is German law. America doesn't own it. It's really unique on how capitals do that. And I'd like to go through and explain it. But just know that there is a building in Tehran, which is the main city in Iran, in the capital, that is the American embassy, because we'd been friends with the Shah, filled with Americans that worked there. So what happens is, as this anger against America boils, people realize, and they're college students, and they always like to say they're college students, so I don't know why that's necessary in the story, but a group of Iranians are very upset, and they're like of college age, 20, 25 years old, that they know there's a group of Americans there in Iran, and Iran is very angry at America now for not giving the Shah back. So they storm the American embassy. And this is a picture of them storming the American embassy. And when they storm inside, they capture all the American citizens that are there in the embassy and hold them hostage. And this is huge news, especially in America, that these hundreds of Americans, I believe it's 100 and, I should probably know that off the top of my head, and I don't. Embarrassing. Anyway, we're going to say 100 of them. It's going to give or take that. It's not like it's 5, even though all the pictures on paper, like there's like 5. There's about 100. We're going to go with 100. You can Google me and tell me how wrong I am on that. Of all the random numbers I keep in my head, this one, I don't know. All right. So, I'm just going to keep saying 100 hostages here. And I'm making myself like a fool every time I do it. But these 100 hostages, they get taken by Iran. America obviously is very upset about it. And Iran says, and so the Ayatollah community, he didn't order this. But once he realizes these people got taken hostage, he like endorses it. And he's like, yes, this is what we're going to do. Now, they do bring the hostages out. This is them on TV. They have them blindfolded. They come out. They put them on TV to let everybody know so you can count them. We're not in here executing them. We're not, starving them to death. We're not doing anything that's going to cause the United Nations to declare war on Iran. Nothing like that. But we're going to keep them. And you're not getting them back until we get the Shah. That is what Iran is saying. We are keeping these hostages until you give us the Shah. Well, America, our typical reaction is like, we ain't giving in to no terrorists. So America does try a rescue effort here in Iran under Jimmy Carter's time in office. It is an absolute massive failure. It's interesting because when Jimmy Carter sits down with the military, with the special forces, and he wants to send in the special forces to try to break these prisoners out and get them to escape, you had your Green Berets, your Navy SEALs, your Delta Force. You had all your special forces units. All wanted to be part of this. They wanted to be the ones to go in. So Jimmy Carter, and this seems like it would make sense. He decides to pick the very best from each group and put basically like the Expendables together, like the movie. Basically put like an elite group together of the best from each group. This ends up being a massive disaster because these individuals they put together, they might have been the best in their group, had never trained or worked together. And long story short, plane crashes in Iran and all these men get killed, don't even get anywhere near where the hostages are oblivious to anything was ever happening. They couldn't even land in Iran. And it is, and since it landed in Iran, Iran now has the wreckage and they can look at it, take pictures of it, and it is obvious that America looks really bad here because not only were we not able to get the hostages out, we couldn't even get to them without crashing. So the Ayatollah, obviously, that's going to upset him that America was trying to use military force to get these people out. So the tensions rise between the United States and the Ayatollah as they desperately demand to get the Shah back. And then here's another twist. The Shah dies. He was here getting cancer treatment, doesn't go well, and the Shah dies. So now it gets weird. And the Ayatollah, he's not just going to release the hostages now because he's made this big statement and America hasn't done anything to, give any credit to him at all or to, honor their wishes. So he doesn't want to just all right, well, he's dead. Here's your hostages back. We're going to go back to however we want. But he doesn't want to murder them or hurt them because then that's just going to, really tick off everybody. So he says, all right, I'll tell you what I'll do, American people. Because the election's coming up where Jimmy Carter's trying to run for re-election. He says, the Ayatollah, if Jimmy Carter loses this election, I will release the hostages. Not that he expects anybody else to be any better. He just wants to get back at Jimmy Carter, who was the president during this whole thing. Jimmy Carter was actually relatively unpopular during this whole thing. This didn't help him, obviously, but there's a lot of stuff we would talk about in American history with Jimmy Carter. There's inflation and his malaise speech. Other things are going on in the background economically in America that he's not well suited for. So in the election of 1980, he runs against a guy named Ronald Reagan, and we're going to talk about Ronald Reagan a lot in the next lesson. He gets absolutely demolished in the Electoral College. The red states are the ones that voted for Ronald Reagan. The blue states are the ones that voted for Jimmy Carter. He absolutely gets demolished in this election. The Ayatollah Khomeini, actually, when this happens, doesn't know if it's a trick or not, and actually holds the hostages until a couple months later when Ronald Reagan gets sworn into office. But after 444 days in captivity, the hostages are released and are sent back to America. They're all unharmed. They were treated fine, and it is a huge relief to Americans that these hostages, which I keep saying there's 100 of them, feel silly now. Anyway, but I do know that the 444 days, that's a number I do know. 444 days these hostages were in captivity and they're released, and is a huge relief for the United States. The question here is, explain why the Ayatollah felt he couldn't just give the hostages back even after the Shah had passed away. It has a lot to do with politics here. Like he had to show his strength. So why couldn't he just give them back? How would that make him look to his people? So these are all offshoots from the Cold War. All these issues are offshoots from the Cold War. As we move here to talk about Jimmy Carter and Russia. So pause me, answer that if you need to. But the Cold War with us and Russia and this massive military buildup that we had needed a lot of oil. That's what's causing these issues in the Middle East, is America's massive dependence on oil. So Jimmy Carter, even though I just talked about him losing an election, we got to go back. There's other things that happened in his time in office in America, dealing specifically with the Cold War and Middle East tensions at the time period. So we're going to go back. He's still the whole hostage crisis is pretty much going on in the background of both of these things. But Jimmy Carter meets with the Russian leader. Now, we've gone through a few now, all right? You had Stalin, all right? Then you have Nikita Khrushchev, all right? And so the guy now, all right, he's like 2 or 3 removed from Stalin, is Brezhnev, all right? So Brezhnev is the new leader now, and he's meeting here with Jimmy Carter, because with Nixon showing up in Russia and getting this ball rolling, signing the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty that we had talked about in a previous lesson. This is, because they're real original with their names, is the Strategic Arms Limitations Treaty 2, or SALT 2. Both sides agree, hey, these baby steps towards not killing each other is good. SALT 2, again, doesn't really do a ton. It is a good attempt here, but this is the same graph I showed you for SALT 1. And the situation with SALT 1 is you had to limit your intercontinental ballistic missiles. But what everybody was doing, Russia and America, they would just put multiple warheads on one missile. Now they say, all right, you can only have one warhead per missile. So it really cuts down the amount of nuclear nukes that you can have. And you're like, cool, so we're safe now, right? Probably 20 of these would take out Russia and America. And so instead of having 5,700, we're basically just going to keep it down to about 1,000. Just about 1,000 each. We could wipe out the Earth 1,000, not 1,000 times over, but quite a few times with the existing stuff. But it's the thought that matters. What's also starting to become a realization to a lot of people is the nuclear missiles are really expensive. Not just to build them, but to upkeep them. They can't just sit there for 50 years and not constantly have maintenance. Countries are having to spend, America and Russia, billions of dollars a year just to keep them functioning, to be ready to go at the press of a button. When you have that many nukes that have to have that much upkeep on them, it is incredibly expensive. And so both sides are like, this is really expensive. And do I need to kill you 70 times? If I could just kill you 30 times, we'll be happy. That's kind of the logic here of one of the motivations for, hey, let's agree to have less nukes. You have less nukes, I have less nukes. In part because the financial aspect of it is really starting to be an issue, especially in Russia. And we're going to talk about that in the next lesson of how the economy is going to be one of the biggest undoings here in the Cold War on the Soviet side. But the question here is, how did Jimmy Carter further de-escalate tensions with Russia with SALT II? So basically, tell me what SALT II did, and why is that a good sign for relations that, hey, World War III might not happen, even though we could clearly still wipe each other out. So answer that completely, pause me, and we'll move on. All right. So Jimmy Carter gets zero credit for this. And honestly, if I had lived through this, like this was happening in present day, I would give him zero credit for it as well. The fact is, and this is a spoiler, the reason this doesn't look like it's going to work, but it does, and it's crazy. Let me just tell you the story. It's called the Camp David Accords. Let me get here to a map. Yay, another map. All right. As we had talked about yesterday, the Yom Kippur War, which was led to the American oil crisis, where OPEC withdrew oil from America because Egypt and Syria declared war on Israel, and they were upset that Israel was getting help from America. We're back to the same thing again. It's the late 1970s, specifically between the countries of Egypt, all right, Egypt and Israel, all right. We're not going to talk about Syria here, just Egypt and Israel. When I say these two countries got history, in the Old Testament of the Bible, this is where Moses went down to free the Israelites from slavery, was from the Pharaoh in Egypt thousands and thousands of years ago. All right. So these countries got some old beef with each other. Long time. So the president is Jimmy Carter. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Jimmy Carter here as we move forward, because while it's a neat little story for America, it's really important for this one. And it's one of the reasons he doesn't get a lot of credit. Jimmy Carter is not a politician. I mean, he was a governor, a one-term governor of Georgia, and was popular there. But he basically comes in office after Nixon had quit and the next guy had pardoned him, and there's all this like political. He is just a good guy. He is a morally upstanding person. Taught Sunday school. All right. All right, you see how old this guy looks here? Because you're probably a lot younger. You're like, oh, look at that old guy there. Yeah, he's an old guy. He's an old president. Became elected president in 1976. This is him running for president, 1976. This is being recorded in 2022. All right? He's still alive and is a fantastic person. Great, great human being. Not a great president, because he's a great human being. It's weird how that works. He comes in, he's a Sunday school teacher. There's a right way of doing things and there's a wrong way of doing things. He's not going to do things shady. He's not going to be sketchy. And he's not going to compromise with immoral people. Well, the problem is, when you're a politician, you have to work with other politicians. You have to compromise with people that are awful because you're a politician. He couldn't get anything done when he was a president because he wouldn't work with people who he thought were like doing things morally wrong. Well, they're politicians. They do things morally wrong. So Jimmy Carter is not a very well respected president in history, but is a wonderful person. It's weird how these two things work out, all right? Because he's not going to do things morally wrong. This is one of his downsides as a president, but it's actually interesting how it plays in the story I'm getting ready to tell you. He's a devout Christian guy. Now, we've always had presidents in America like, I'm a Christian, I go to church. Jimmy Carter is a devout Christian, right? He, teaches Sunday school. He's very knowledgeable of religion. Well, Egypt and Israel keep going to war all the time, and it really messes up the oil situation in America. Something that Jimmy Carter yells at the American people, like, we're addicted to oil, we need to stop. And everybody's like, don't yell at me. And the American people didn't like him. Anyway, he's got to stop Egypt and Israel from fighting with each other. So he invites them both to his vacation house. The president has a vacation house, which is like the White House, but kind of out more in the middle of nowhere, and you're not getting within like 3 miles of it without getting like hit with like a laser, I would assume. And it's called Camp David. So if you're invited to the White House, right, as the leader of another country, it's super formal. There's going to be all this press there. You know, you're going to show up, and you know, there's going to be really formal and nice. If you're invited to Camp David, you get to go just hang out with the president, swim in the pool. I imagine it's like his vacation house. It's much more relaxed, not all this press there. So he invites his buddy, who is the leader of Egypt, to come hang out with him at Camp David. And the leader of Egypt's like, cool. And he shows up. He also turns around and invites the leader of Israel to come hang out with him at Camp David. And they're like, cool. And shows up. The two men don't realize the other one is coming. And he basically sneak attacks them here at Camp David. Is they all walk into the room together and they see each other. And these two old men, I got a picture right here of them. The two guys sitting on either side of Jimmy Carter hate each other with a passion, like on a personal level. And they immediately turn around and scamper away. He has to like block the doors to try to keep them from leaving, but he lets them. I mean, he's just going to like kidnap them. And he has to try to get these men to discuss what their beef is with each other to stop them from going to war all the time. He is here for 10 days. These two men are in separate cabins and will not come out of their cabin. He has to go talk to one guy at this cabin, get his side of the story on whatever, then go make sure, get all this research and everything done and verify what's being said, then go take that information to the other guy, and then he's going to talk about how much he hates this guy, and he has to go back and forth. And gradually, he's able to get them to come and talk in the same room to him. Then he gets them to talk to each other. Jimmy Carter is able to do this because Jimmy Carter, as a devout religious person himself, you have a Muslim, a Jew, and a Christian. Jimmy Carter, they don't start arguing about something that happened 3 years ago. They argue about stuff that happened thousands of years ago. And because Jimmy Carter is a devout Christian, he's like, ooh, I know what I see that. Okay, well, here's his perspective on it. All right. And you have to realize that this is his perspective on it. And by doing that, he gets them to be able to talk. And after 10 days, these two old men and Jimmy Carter, they come out at the Camp David Accords, and they sign a document saying, all right, Israel and Egypt won't ever go to war anymore. We ironed it out. And everybody like claps, a little golf clap. And this is the picture that comes from it. And then everybody goes home. Nobody thinks this is going to be a legit thing because it looks like he just kidnapped these old guys and said, you're not leaving until you agree, which is pretty much what he said nicely. And he gets no credit for this when he is president because it looks done like they just said whatever they could just to leave. To present day, again, the actual day this is being recorded, Egypt and Israel have not gone to war. That is 42 years. The longest since, I mean, they went to war like every other year. A war has not happened. The Camp David Accords have actually withstood the test of time and is an absolutely impressive feat by Jimmy Carter up to present day that he got no credit for because nobody thought it was a real thing. And then he has other drama going on with the economy and inflation and other stuff in the United States that he's going to lose the election. And it's not too much later, like, look at Jimmy Carter pulling that out. So this is something that wasn't popular at the time, but ends up being really important. So the question here is, what was so impressive about the Camp David Accords? So answer that completely. Pause me if you need to. And that's what I got for you today. See you guys tomorrow.